Welcome back to the deep dive. It is absolutely fantastic to have you with us again. Seriously, we're just thrilled with how many of you are tuning in.
Yeah, it's been great seeing the numbers climb.
It really has. And thank you, honestly, for all the new subscriptions, the views, and especially for hitting all those like buttons. It makes a difference, you know.
It does, absolutely.
And if this is your first time joining us, hey, welcome. Please do yourself a favor and check out our previous deep dives. There's a whole library of stuff waiting for you there.
Lots to explore.
Definitely. Now, for today's deep dive, I'm going to tell you right now, this one, it's going to be exceptionally long, probably one of our longest yet.
We did go deep on this one.
We really did, but I promise you, it is absolutely worth every single minute. Stick with us, because here's where it gets really interesting. What we're about to explore today, it's a topic where we gathered just tons of sources, ancient myths, scientific papers, historical accounts, even modern conspiracy theories. And at first glance, they seemed completely unrelated, like totally separate things.
Right, you wouldn't necessarily think they'd connect?
Not at all. But as we started reading and, dissecting things, connecting the dots, it turned out they all link up in the most astonishing way. Honestly, it just left us amazed, kind of in disbelief, actually.
It's a fascinating convergence. So today, we're plunging into the enigma of the hollow earth. It's this idea, this concept that has just persistently captivated people for centuries. It really has. It's evolved from, like you said, ancient myths into these, pseudoscientific theories.
Right.
And they fundamentally challenge our conventional understanding of Earth's structure, what we think we know.
Right.
It's a truly multifaceted idea, weaving together belief, speculation, and some really surprising historical threads. It sort of invites you to question what you think you know about our own planet.
Okay, with that incredible setup in mind, let's unpack this. Let's start this journey.
Okay.
All right, so let's start with the basics, the fundamental question. What is our planet made of? What's the accepted scientific view? The baseline we all learn in school, the thing all these other theories push against?
Okay, yeah. So the modern scientific consensus, and this is backed up by just extensive empirical data, heaps of it, is that the Earth is a solid body.
Solid, not hollow.
Definitely not hollow. Not in any way, shape, or form that these theories suggest. Our planet is structured, basically, in a series of distinct concentric layers. Think of it like an onion, maybe.
Okay.
But with layers of different densities, different states of matter, solid, liquid. And we've mapped this out pretty meticulously, mainly using seismology, studying earthquake waves.
Right, how earthquakes travel through the planet tells us what's inside.
Exactly. It's like a giant ultrasound, almost. Earthquakes send out waves, and seismographs all over the world record how those waves speed up, slow down, bend, or even stop. It gives us a remarkably clear picture of the interior.
So what are these layers?
Well, there are four main ones. Starting from the outside, where we are, that's the crust. It's the outermost layer, relatively thin, rigid rock, mostly granite and basalt.
How thin is thin?
Typically around 30 to 40 kilometers thick under the continents, sometimes thicker under mountains. But under the oceans, it can be much thinner, maybe just 5 to 10 kilometers in places like oceanic trenches.
Got it. And below that?
Below the crust, you've got the mantle. This is the biggest layer by volume. Extends down about 2,900 kilometers. It's made of dense, hot silicate rock, rich in things like magnesium, iron, calcium, aluminum.
Is it liquid, like lava?
Not exactly liquid, no. It's mostly solid, but because it's under such intense heat and pressure, it behaves like a very, very thick, slow-moving fluid over geological time. Big taffy, maybe, but on a planetary scale.
Ah, okay, so it flows slowly.
Right, and those slow, churning convection currents in the mantle are what drive plate tectonics. Moves the continents around, causes earthquakes, volcanoes, all that stuff.
Okay, mantle, then what?
Deeper still, around that 2,900 kilometer mark, we hit the outer core. And this part is liquid. It's believed to be mostly molten iron and nickel. It goes down to about 150 kilometers deep.
Liquid metal.
Exactly. And it's the swirling motion within this liquid outer core that generates Earth's magnetic field. Yeah. Our planetary shield, basically. Protects us from harmful solar radiation.
Yeah.
Super important.
Okay. And the very center.
Finally, right at the heart of the planet, from about 1,550 kilometers down to the center, roughly 6,371 kilometers, is the inner core. And this is solid again.
Solid, even deeper and hotter.
Yep. It's incredibly hot, maybe as hot as the surface of the sun, but the pressure is just immense.
Yep.
All the weight of the planet pressing down keeps it squeezed into a solid ball of iron and nickel. Extremely dense, sometimes called Earth's solid heart, or The Polish term źródełko is sometimes used, meaning like a little kernel or inner core.
Źródełko, okay.
So, yeah, to sum it up, science is really clear. The Earth is not hollow. It's made of these 4 main layers: crust, mantle, outer core, and inner core. That's the established picture.
Right. Clear as day based on the data. Solid, layered sphere. Physics says so. But what if? What if that wasn't the whole story? What if there was a completely different picture? One proposed by some, brilliant minds and maybe some just very curious ones throughout history. It's such a huge leap from that solid model.
It really is. And what's striking, as you said, is that these hollow Earth ideas weren't always just, folklore or fringe stuff.
No.
Sometimes they were serious attempts, quite sophisticated for their era, to explain real natural phenomena, things they couldn't otherwise account for.
Right.
Which does raise an important question. Why?
Yeah.
Why did this concept, this idea of a hollow world, keep resonating? Why did it gain traction over centuries, even as science pointed elsewhere? It maybe speaks to this deep human desire to believe there's something more, something hidden, something grand beneath the surface.
Absolutely, because, modern science gives us a clear answer, but the idea of a hollow Earth, it has this surprisingly rich history, and it involves some really unexpected figures, people who were pioneers in their fields. Maybe not right about this, but still, sharp minds. They weren't just fantasists. Often they were intellectuals trying to make sense of the world with the tools they had.
Exactly. Take Edmund Halley. Yes, that Halley. Halley's Comet.
The astronomer.
The very same.
Yeah.
Brilliant astronomer, mathematician. Back in 1692, he scientifically proposed that the Earth was a hollow outer shell, about 800 kilometers, or 500 miles thick, he figured.
Just an empty space inside?
Oh no, much more complex than that.
Yeah.
He envisioned 2 more inner concentric shells, like Russian nesting dolls,
Yeah.
and a central core at the very middle.
Whoa.
Yeah, and he thought these shells were separated by luminous atmospheres, glowing air, basically, and they rotated at different speeds. He even suggested these inner spaces could be inhabited.
Inhabited, wow. Why did he think this?
Well, crucially, he offered this model as a scientific hypothesis. His goal was to explain weird compass readings, anomalous variations in the Earth's magnetic field that sailors were reporting. He thought maybe these differently rotating inner shells were causing the magnetic shifts. For the time, before seismology, it was a plausible though wrong attempt to solve a real mystery.
Okay, that's fascinating. Halley. Who else?
Then, in the 18th century, you have Leonhard Euler, another absolute giant of mathematics.
Euler, yeah.
He independently concluded Earth is hollow, also thought it contained a central sun, and was inhabited. His reasoning was more theoretical, based on mathematics and sort of, philosophical ideas about planetary harmony and structure. A perfectly balanced sphere, in his view, might be hollow with a light source inside.
Just based on math and logic?
Pretty much. Shows how powerful abstract thought can be, even if it leads down a wrong path sometimes.
Okay. Then things got maybe a bit more eccentric.
You could say that. Moving into the 19th century, 1818, you get John Cleve Symmes Jr. He became probably the most famous, certainly the most vocal early proponent.
Symes Hole, right?
That's the one. He proposed a hollow shell, maybe 1,300 kilometers, 800 miles thick.
Right.
But the key part, huge openings at both poles, like massive holes, maybe 2,300 kilometers, 1,400 miles across.
Giant holes at the poles.
Yeah. And he didn't stop there. He thought there were 4 inner hollow spheres inside too. And he wasn't just theorizing, he actively campaigned for an expedition, tried to get the US government to fund a trip to the North Pole opening to prove it. He actually got some support.
Really? He wanted to sail into the Earth?
He did. Famously declared something like, "I pledge my life in support of this truth, and I'm ready to explore the cavity if the world will support me." Captured the public imagination, in that age of exploration.
Wow. Okay. Any 20th century proponents?
Oh, yes. Fast forward to 1913, a guy named Marshall Gardner. He also pushed the inner sun idea, thought it powered the interior world.
Yeah.
He even patented a working model of a hollow Earth.
Patented it?
Yep. He wrote a book, A Journey to the Earth's Interior, trying to pull together different observations. Believed Eskimos and Mongols actually originated from inside the Earth, coming up via the North Pole.
Okay, that's quite a theory.
And maybe the most radical idea came from Cyrus Teed in 1869. He developed something called cellular cosmogony.
Cellular cosmogony.
Yeah. His idea was completely flipped. He thought, we don't live on the outside of a hollow sphere. We live on the inside.
Wait, we live inside a concave Earth?
According to Teed, yes.
Yeah.
Humanity lives inside a hollow ball. The entire universe, sun, moon, stars, everything exists within this shell. Stars were just reflections of some central solar mechanism. The sun was like a big battery at the center of our inner cosmos.
That's mind-bending. Did anyone believe him?
He founded a whole communal cult. the Koreshan Unity. Based right here in Florida, actually. They lasted for decades, trying to scientifically prove his concave Earth theory with surveying experiments.
It's just astounding, isn't it? From Halley trying to solve a real scientific puzzle, to Euler's math, to Sum's wanting to sail into a hole, to Gardner's patent, to Teed thinking we're on the inside.
It's a huge range.
The main takeaway isn't just that they were wrong about the Earth's structure, right? It's how they arrived at these ideas. Using the knowledge they had, grappling with mysteries, they built these incredibly elaborate models. Shows that human drive to explain everything, even if it means taking some massive speculative leaps, it really makes you think about how we try to map out the unknown. So, okay, let's play along for a minute. If the Earth were hollow, like these guys proposed, what's it supposed to be like in there? You mentioned Halley and Euler thought it could be inhabited. Forget the icy poles we know on the surface. These theories describe something totally different, right? Almost like a hidden paradise.
Exactly. That's the consistent picture you get across most of these accounts and theories. It's not a cold, dark void. It's described as an idyllic, almost utopian environment. A stark contrast to the frozen Arctic or Antarctic landscapes. They often call it an Arctic's paradise, but yeah, it's anything but Arctic.
So what are the key features? Warmth.
Definitely warmth and lushness. That's central. Accounts consistently portrayed as warm, sunny, green. You hear descriptions of green areas of land, fertile vegetation, sparkling lakes, pristine rivers. Imagine, stepping through an opening at the pole and suddenly you're in this thriving green world.
Like a hidden oasis.
Kind of. And the scale is supposed to be immense. Trees growing to incredible heights, some claim, say, 1,000 feet tall.
Yeah.
Vast ancient forests. The climate inside is described as ideal, like perpetual spring or summer, maybe.
But how? Where does the light and heat come from deep inside the Earth?
That's the other key feature, the internal sun.
An inner sun, like a miniature star inside the planet.
That's the idea in many theories. A central sun providing constant warmth and light. It ensures an ideal temperature all the time, so no real day-night cycle as we know it.
What's this inner sun supposed to be?
Descriptions vary. Sometimes it's seen as a smaller, maybe dimmer version of our sun. Other times it's described almost mystically, like a God-created entity. It adds to this feeling that the inner world is somehow special, maybe even sacred.
Okay, so it's warm, lit by an inner sun, lush vegetation. What about life, animals, people?
Oh yeah, abundant life is a huge part of it. With perfect conditions, life is said to thrive. You get descriptions of lush vegetation unlike anything on the surface. And the animals, supposedly larger and healthier than surface creatures.
Large, like giant animals.
Some accounts mention that, yeah. Things like fat caribou and musk oxen, just thriving. But also, more dramatically, creatures resembling mammoths or elephants.
Mammoths, like prehistoric survivors.
That's the implication. A hidden world where maybe ancient ecosystems were preserved. It paints this picture of a primordial paradise, untouched by surface changes. And this resonates with ancient myths too. Lots of the cultures have legends of a blessed land of eternal light and summer, or a land of the eternal sun, often hidden away somewhere. It taps into that deep human longing for a perfect place.
It really does. It's this vision of a hidden Eden, a world within our world. Totally the opposite of the poles we know. Sounds amazing, like something from a fantasy novel. But okay, if this place exists, how do you get there? How do proponents say you actually enter this inner world?
Right.
Because a hidden paradise needs a doorway. And the theories don't just talk about vague tunnels, do they? They suggest specific access points, detailed locations right there at the poles.
Exactly. The polar openings are the critical link. They're seen as the physical gateways, not just metaphorical ones.
Right.
And the descriptions, yeah, they get surprisingly precise, almost suspiciously so, some might say. It adds this layer of seeming credibility to claims that are, let's face it, pretty out there.
So where are they supposed to be? Let's start with the North Pole.
Okay, for the North Pole opening, proponents often cite specific coordinates, 87.7 degrees north latitude and 142.2 degrees east longitude.
That precise. Where does that number come from?
Well, one story, quite popular in conspiracy circles, is that these coordinates were memorized by a Colonel Bill Udell from classified documents he supposedly saw at Area 51.
Area 51. Okay, now we're really getting into it.
Yeah, it adds that modern military conspiracy angle. Anyway, these coordinates place the opening on the Russian side of the Arctic. The opening itself, at its narrowest point, the neck, is said to be about 90 miles across. And the Earth's crust, or shell, is supposedly thinner there, maybe 800 miles thick.
Still pretty thick, but thinner than elsewhere.
Relatively, yeah. And there's this detail that the geographic North Pole itself isn't the center of the hole, but about 135 minutes, sometimes implied as nautical miles of arc, away from the center, placing it on the upper edge of the perimeter.
What does that mean, upper edge?
It suggests the opening isn't a sharp drop, but a gradual curve inwards. We'll come back to why that's important.
Okay. And the South Pole. Is there a matching hole down there?
Yes, according to the theories. For the South Pole opening, the estimated coordinates are given as 87.7 degrees south latitude and 37.8 degrees west longitude.
Same latitude, different longitude.
Roughly, yeah. And here we have a more modern, compelling personal account from a retired U.S. Navy flight engineer, a guy named Brian.
What did Brian claim?
He claimed that during a flight mission near the South Pole, he and his crew flew over a very large hole leading deep into the land. He said it was only about 8 to 16 kilometers from the geographic South Pole itself, in an area that was supposedly a no-fly zone for U.S. military planes.
A huge hole near the pole. Did he say how big?
He described it as large enough for their C-130 aircraft to fly into, which is pretty massive.
Wow. A C-130 is the big plane.
It is. And the kicker. Brian claimed that after reporting this, he was debriefed by secret agents from Washington and basically told to shut up about it, ordered to remain silent.
Ah, the classic cover-up angle.
Exactly. It feeds right into that narrative.
So these openings, you mentioned they're not sheer drops, but curved.
Right. It's a key detail in many descriptions. The surface is often described as curved, like a donut, a gradual slope inwards.
Why is that important?
Because, proponents argue, it means you could potentially enter the inner Earth without even realizing it, especially if you were flying or sailing without precise instruments, or maybe if your compass went haywire near the magnetic pole. You might just think you're following a coastline or going into a large bay or depression, gradually descending along the curve into the interior.
So you wouldn't see an edge, just a continuous surface curving downward.
That's the idea. It makes the alleged sightings, like Byrd's perhaps, seem slightly more plausible within the theory's own logic. A subtle transition, not a dramatic plunge.
Okay, the precision is striking. Coordinates, diameters, eyewitness accounts from military folks. It definitely adds a layer of detail that makes it sound less like pure myth. But beyond these personal claims and alleged coordinates, what other evidence do people point to? This is where those seemingly unrelated threads start weaving together, right?
Absolutely. This is where proponents really start connecting dots, pulling in various observations and reinterpreting them as proof. It's a fascinating mix of technological anomalies, natural phenomena, and even mysterious disappearances.
Like what? What's the most famous piece of evidence?
Probably the SS-7 satellite photo. This image, taken on November 23, 1968 by an ES weather satellite, became hugely significant in Hollow Earth circles.
Why? What did it show?
It appeared to show a large, dark, circular area, right over the North Pole, basically. Huge hole where the pole should be. It was published by Ray Palmer, a very influential, though controversial, ufologist and publisher who was a huge believer in the Hollow Earth.
Ray Palmer again.
Yep. He presented this photo as definitive proof. He said, look, there it is. Confirmation of the polar opening in the underground super race he believed lived there. The photo caused a massive stir.
Even though ESA released it just as a weather photo.
Right. For ESA, it was just atmospheric data. For Palmer and his followers, it was the smoking gun.
Okay, what else? You mentioned satellites.
Yeah, another claim relates to NORAD satellite flight paths. NORAD tracks everything in orbit, right?
Right.
Well, proponents claim that if you look at the paths of satellites orbiting over the Arctic, none of them fly directly over a specific zone on the Russian side, roughly between 115 degrees east and 155 degrees east longitude.
Why would that be significant?
They argue it's because NORAD knows there's an opening there. Satellites supposedly avoid it because they get pulled in, or their orbits would be disrupted, they'd be lost in space, or follow the curvature down into the Earth. Some even claim early satellites did go missing trying to fly over that spot.
So the lack of satellites over that specific spot is proof of the hole.
That's the interpretation, yes. A deliberate avoidance pattern.
Okay. What about natural phenomena? Less technological proof.
Plenty of those get pulled in too. Things like unusual weather patterns in the Arctic. Reports of warm, moist winds coming from the north in the dead of winter. Finding driftwood with green leaves washed up on Arctic shores where no trees grow.
Where would that come from?
From the inner Earth, proponents say, washed out through the opening. Also, the migration patterns of some birds and animals. Why do some fly north into the Arctic for the winter? Maybe they're heading for that warmer inner world. And the transpolar drift, This is a known current of air and ice that flows across the Arctic from near Siberia towards Greenland. Proponents reinterpret this. They say it's not just a surface current, it's air and moisture emanating from the polar opening, evidence of the warm, moist interior influencing the surface.
Okay. What about the northern lights, the aurora borealis?
Even the aurora gets reinterpreted. Science explains it as solar particles hitting our atmosphere, interacting with the magnetic field. Beautiful physics.
Right.
But hollow Earth proponents, some suggest the aurora isn't caused by the sun outside, but by the inner sun. They say it's internal sunlight emanating from the polar region, maybe getting trapped or interacting with the Van Allen belts, making it visible from the surface, a light shining out from within.
Wow, okay. That's a completely different take.
It is. And finally, you have the lost aviators. There were Soviet flyers who disappeared on flights heading north from Russia between the Kara Sea and Alaska back in the mid-20th century. Officially, these were likely tragic accidents in extreme conditions.
But the theory suggests
Maybe they didn't crash. Maybe they accidentally flew into the northern opening and never came back. Their unexplained disappearances become another piece of proof.
So you really see it now, how all these different things, satellite photos, orbital paths, weather, animals, lights, missing planes, ancient myths, they all get gathered up and woven into this single narrative supporting the polar openings.
Exactly. It's a compelling tapestry, even if each thread, when examined scientifically, might unravel. But together, proponents feel it paints a powerful picture of a hidden reality.
Okay, so we have this inner world, potentially accessible through polar openings, lit by an inner sun, maybe full of mammoths. The big question then is, who or what lives there? If it's inhabited, like Halley and Euler speculated way back when, and how does this connect to modern mysteries like UFOs? This feels like where the theory gets really wild.
It definitely takes another leap here, yeah. The inner Earth isn't just seen as a lost world of prehistoric creatures. It's often believed to be home to highly sophisticated beings. The dominant idea is of an advanced super race.
Super race. Like superhumans?
Sort of. They're described as peaceful, highly advanced, technologically, spiritually, you name it, far beyond us, surface dwellers. They're supposed to possess incredible technology, including flying saucer technology.
Oh, there's a UFO connection.
Right. And they're said to live incredibly long lives, in perfect health for hundreds and hundreds of years. Maybe due to the ideal climate, maybe advanced science, maybe both.
Where did these beings come from? Are they aliens who settled inside Earth?
Theories vary. Some suggest they're descendants of ancient, lost surface civilizations, like maybe Lemuria or Atlantis.
Yeah.
Others propose they could be the lost 10 tribes of Israel, led into the earth by God through the northern opening. Sometimes they're even described as giants, having grown larger over time due to the perfect conditions inside.
Giants, lost tribes, Lemurians, quite a mix. And the UFOs, they build them inside the Earth.
That's a core tenet of this branch of the theory. The idea that UFOs are not extraterrestrial. They don't come from other planets. They originate from these advanced civilizations hidden within our own planet.
So they're intraterrestrials, not extraterrestrial.
Exactly. They supposedly use the polar openings, or maybe hidden entrances in deep ocean trenches or volcanic vents, to come and go. They observe us, maybe interact occasionally, but mostly stay hidden.
Is there any evidence cited for that connection?
Well, proponents point to things like the alleged abduction of Betty and Barney Hill back in 1961. It's one of the most famous cases. During their hypnotic regression sessions, they supposedly recalled being told by their abductors that UFOs had bases at both the North and South Poles and also deep under the ocean.
Connecting UFOs directly to those polar regions.
Precisely. And then there's that book by Raymond Bernard, The Hollow Earth, published in 1964. It's hugely influential. He suggested that maybe the Atlanteans didn't all perish. Maybe they escaped into the Earth's interior before their continent sank.
And they stayed hidden until
the atomic age. Bernard speculated they started emerging in their flying saucers after the bombings of Hiroshima and Nagasaki because they were worried that surface humanity's new destructive power, especially radioactivity, might eventually penetrate their hidden world and contaminate it.
So UFO sightings increased after WWII because the inner Earthers were concerned about us.
That was Bernard's theory, yeah. It offers this Earth-based, yet still incredibly mysterious explanation for the whole UFO phenomenon. Brings it closer to home in a weird way.
It really does tie things together, doesn't it? Ancient myths of lost races, the hollow Earth structure, and the modern mystery of UFOs all explained in one package. But it doesn't stop there, right? There are those legendary hidden cities, Shambhala, Agartha. How do they fit in?
Yes, Shambhala and Agartha. This is where the theory takes on a deeply spiritual and mythological dimension. These legendary realms, usually considered purely symbolic or located in some ethereal dimension in traditional beliefs, get pulled into the Hollow Earth framework and posited as actual physical places inside the planet.
So Shambhala isn't just a metaphor for enlightenment.
Not in this context, no. Shambhala, primarily from Tibetan Buddhist traditions, is often described as this mystical kingdom hidden behind impenetrable mountains of snow, usually north of Tibet, a place where sacred teachings are preserved.
Right. The hidden kingdom.
It's called many things: a place of peace, the forbidden land, land of white waters, land of radiant spirits, land of wonders. But within the Hollow Earth theory, it's imagined as a literal physical place. Maybe a delicate valley hidden among high mountains with hot springs and rich vegetation, matching those Arctic paradise descriptions, right?
Exactly. Defying the surrounding cold.
It's said to be illuminated by a magnificent central palace radiating powerful diamond-like light. Maybe that's the inner sun or some advanced tech. The ruler, sometimes called the king of the world, supposedly watches over humanity using a magic mirror. And messengers from Shambhala are believed to be active on the surface, guiding events.
And the location. Still Tibet.
Well, significantly, many Tibetan Buddhists are said to believe Shambhala is probably at the North Pole, hidden behind or within ice mountains, which aligns perfectly with the northern polar opening idea.
Huh. And how is it hidden?
It's said to be protected by an akasha veil of invisibility. Akasha being like an ethereal field or record. This veil, powered by unknown occult forces, supposedly makes it undetectable by planes or armies. You can't just stumble upon it.
Wow. And there are prophecies about it.
Oh yes. Famous prophecies say that a future king of Shambhala will eventually emerge with a great army to defeat evil and liberate the world, ushering in a new golden age.
Okay. And Agartha, is that the same thing?
It's very closely related, often used interchangeably or described as part of the same inner Earth network. Agartha is generally described as an underground paradise, sometimes a vast network of subterranean cities. Buddhist traditions, particularly as recounted by explorers like Ferdinand Ossendowski in the 1920s, claim millions of highly evolved people live in Agartha, also ruled by the king of the world. It's basically the central hub, or another name for this advanced, hidden subterranean civilization.
So these ancient myths, these spiritual concepts of hidden paradises and enlightened kingdoms, they get mapped directly onto the physical Hollow Earth model.
Precisely. What were once perhaps allegories for inner states or future hopes become literal geographic locations within the planet. It gives those ancient stories a whole new physical dimension for believers. It suggests the myths were true all along, just misunderstood.
Which brings us to the people who supposedly confirmed all this. The alleged eyewitnesses, the explorers who claimed they actually went there or saw the entrances. And perhaps the most famous, most controversial confirmer is that American polar explorer we mentioned earlier, Admiral Richard Byrd. His story seems absolutely central to the modern Hollow Earth belief.
Yes, Admiral Richard Byrd is, without a doubt, the pivotal figure in the 20th century popularization of the Hollow Earth theory. Primarily, though, it's due to how his actual documented expeditions were later interpreted or perhaps misinterpreted and sensationalized by figures like Ray Palmer and another writer, Amedeo Giannini. There's a huge gap between Byrd's official records and the incredible stories told about him.
So what's the story they told? What did Byrd supposedly find?
Okay, according to Palmer and Giannini, during a flight allegedly made in 1947 over the North Pole, Byrd didn't just fly over the pole, he flew past it for about 2,750 kilometers. Or 1,700 miles, supposedly.
Way beyond the pole. Into what?
Into the polar opening, they claimed. And he supposedly radioed back these astonishing reports, saying he saw not snow, but areas of land with mountains, forests, vegetation, lakes, and rivers. Green, fertile land inside the Arctic Circle.
Just like the Arctic paradise descriptions.
Exactly. And even more sensationally, he allegedly reported seeing a strange animal that looked like a mammoth grazing down there.
A live mammoth. Wow, okay. Did he claim anything similar for the South Pole?
The story continues, yes. Following an alleged Antarctic expedition, perhaps around 1956, though dates vary in the telling, Byrd supposedly stated his team traveled 3,700 kilometers, or 2,300 miles, beyond the South Pole, again finding an entrance to an inner region. Before his death in 1957, he's reported to have referred to this hidden area as an enchanted continent in the sky, or a land of eternal mystery. Some accounts even connected to the legendary Rainbow City, supposedly the cradle of a lost civilization.
linking it back to Shambhala and Agartha.
Precisely. So Palmer and Gianni took these alleged statements and sightings and ran with them. They declared it was proof that the Earth had this unusual shape, like a donut, with depressions or holes at the poles leading inside. They believe Byrd had literally flown into the large concave cavities of the poles, into the great enigma of the Earth's interior. For proponents, this was a respected American hero confirming their wildest theories.
And you mentioned this ties into Eskimo lore, too.
Yeah, proponents find that connection compelling. Traditional Eskimo or Inuit stories often speak of a mysterious land to the north or northwest, beyond the ice. A sunny and green world, a land that is warm, clothed in summer green all year round, inhabited by fat caribou and musk oxen. Sometimes it was called Zimiakoa, which apparently relates to potatoes, suggesting fertile ground. This mythical warm land near the supposed northern polar opening sounds remarkably similar to what Byrd allegedly saw. It suggests, to believers, an ancient indigenous knowledge of the inner world.
So you've got this decorated admiral, his alleged incredible sightings, mammoths, a hidden world aligning perfectly with ancient myths and indigenous legends. It's an incredibly powerful narrative, almost too perfect maybe, which makes the next part, the skepticism, even more crucial. But Byrd wasn't the only one, right? There were other accounts.
That's right. He's the most famous, but not the only alleged witness. And the consistency across different stories, different eras, is part of what proponents find so convincing. It suggests a pattern, not just isolated fantasies.
Like who else?
Well, there's the much older story of Olaf Jansen. This was supposedly a Norwegian fisherman who, back in 1829, claimed he and his father accidentally sailed their small boat into the North Polar opening.
Sailed right in. What happened?
According to his account, which was published much later, they spent 2 years living inside the Earth. They encountered advanced civilizations, people who were possibly giants, living in this illuminated inner world with its central sun. Then they supposedly exited via the South Polar opening.
2 years inside, with giants.
That's the story. It reads like pure adventure fiction, and many treat it as such, but it shares all those core elements. Polar opening, inner sun, advanced inhabitants, even giants. It predates Byrd by a century, but echoes the same themes.
Okay. And more recently, you mentioned Brian, the Navy flight engineer.
Yes, Brian, the retired U.S. Navy flight engineer we talked about earlier. His claim is much more modern, putting it firmly in the era of government secrecy and conspiracy. His vivid description of flying over that very large hole near the South Pole, big enough for his C-130. And crucially, his claim of being debriefed by secret agents from Washington and sworn to secrecy.
That adds that element of active cover-up.
Exactly. It transforms it from just a strange observation into evidence of something the powers that be don't want us to know. These personal stories, even without hard proof, become powerful anecdotes that keep the theory alive.
And then there's the darkest thread in this whole tapestry, the connection that brings in one of history's most horrific chapters and adds this layer of global conspiracy. The alleged Nazi link.
Yeah, this is where the Hollow Earth theory intersects with some truly unsettling territory. The purported connection between Nazi Germany and the Hollow Earth is a persistent, though highly controversial and often lurid part of the lore. It has this sinister geopolitical dimension.
How does that connection supposedly work?
Well, it often starts with the Thule Society. This was a real German occultist group with Völkisch ideologies, influential in the early days of the Nazi Party. The claim is that the Thule Society was deeply interested in myths of hidden worlds like Agartha and Shambhala, possibly drawing on Tibetan legends about polar openings and inner realms.
They were studying Tibetan myths?
Supposedly. Some stories even claim they brought Tibetan monks or lamas to Berlin to advise Hitler, seeking access to ancient secrets or powers hidden within the earth. This supposed occult interest is then linked to Nazi Antarctic expeditions. The story goes that Hitler, perhaps influenced by these ideas, ordered expeditions to Antarctica, specifically to the area called New Swabia, to search for an entrance to the inner Earth.
To find a gateway. For what purpose? A hidden base? Refuge?
All of the above, according to different versions. A secure base, a source of untapped power, maybe even an escape route. This ties into a statement allegedly made in 1944 by Admiral Karl Dönitz, the head of the German U-boat fleet. He reportedly boasted that the German submarine fleet had built an invisible fortress for the Führer, somewhere in the eternal ice.
An invisible fortress in Antarctica.
That's the quote often cited. Hollow Earth proponents interpret this as potentially referring to secret submarine tunnels leading from Antarctica into the inner Earth. Some claim that maps showing these routes, or plans for an Antarctic Base 211, were even found by the Allies in Berlin after the war.
Maps to the inner Earth. found in Berlin.
That's the claim in some of the more extreme conspiracy theories. And it gets wilder. There's a purported letter from a crew member of a German U-boat, U-209, named Karl Strasberger. He allegedly wrote that their submarine reached the inner Earth Agartha in 1943, but was unable to return. A one-way trip to the hidden realm.
Wow, a U-boat reaching Agartha.
Again, highly questionable sourcing, but it's part of the narrative. And the ultimate culmination of this thread is the fantastic story that Hitler didn't die in Berlin, that he and maybe Martin Bormann and other key Nazis escaped via U-boat to Antarctica, entered the Hollow Earth through the southern opening, and lived out their days in this hidden sanctuary.
So Hitler escaping to Agartha, that's quite something.
It's definitely out there. But you see how it all connects. It brings together ancient Eastern mysticism, polar exploration, advanced technology, UFOs, and the darkest regime of the 20th century, all converging on this single fantastical idea of a world hidden within our own. It's just astonishing how these completely disparate elements get woven together.
It really is. It creates this all-encompassing alternative reality, which makes it absolutely essential now to step back and look at the scientific perspective. After hearing all that, what does mainstream science actually say? Does any of it hold water? Okay, we've journeyed through the history, the descriptions, the alleged gateways, the inhabitants, the UFOs, the myths, the confirmers like Byrd, even the Nazi connection. It's an incredibly intricate, interwoven story. But now we absolutely have to bring it back to earth, so to speak. What does mainstream science say about all this? How does it hold up under rigorous empirical scrutiny?
Well, to put it bluntly, it doesn't hold up at all. The scientific community's rejection of the Hollow Earth concept is about as unanimous and overwhelming as it gets in science. It's not even considered a fringe theory anymore. It's firmly in the realm of pseudoscience, directly contradicted by fundamental physics and decades of geological data.
So it's not just unlikely, it's physically impossible based on what we know.
Pretty much, yeah.
Yeah.
Let's go back to the physical properties of Earth. As we discussed earlier, seismology, the study of earthquake waves, gives us an incredibly detailed picture of the interior.
P waves and S waves.
Exactly. P waves travel through solids and liquids, S waves only through solids. By tracking how these waves travel, where they speed up, slow down, reflect off boundaries, or get blocked entirely, like S waves at the liquid outer core, we can map the density, composition, and state of matter all the way down. And that data consistently shows a dense layered structure, increasing in pressure and density towards the center. There's simply no vast voids, no hollow spaces, no internal atmospheres compatible with this seismic data. A hollow structure just wouldn't transmit waves this way.
And we've tried drilling down too.
We have. The deepest hole ever drilled is the Kola super deep borehole in Russia. It went down over 12 kilometers, about 7.5 miles.
Did they find anything unusual? Any hint of a cavity?
Not at all. They found exactly what geology predicted. Increasing temperature and pressure, different rock strata. No hollow spaces, no inner sun, no mammoth, just solid rock getting incredibly hot and dense. It actually confirmed the standard model, and the sheer difficulty of drilling that deep highlighted the extreme conditions inside the Earth.
So physics and direct observation both point to a solid Earth.
Overwhelmingly so. The science is crystal clear on this. Our planet is not hollow. No vast internal spaces, no inner sun, no hidden paradise accessible through polar holes. Based on everything we know about geology, gravity, planetary formation, and seismic waves, the evidence simply isn't there. It contradicts basic physics.
Okay. But what about all that evidence the proponents cite? We spent a lot of time on Byrd's alleged sightings, the satellite photos, the warm winds, Brian's story, the NORAD tracks. How does science explain those specific claims? Because proponents weave them into such a convincing narrative.
Right, and that's where critical thinking and looking at the actual data, not just the interpretation, becomes key. We can address each of those points directly.
Let's start with the big one, Admiral Byrd's official records. What do they actually say?
Well, historians and researchers who have examined Byrd's actual diaries and official flight logs find they directly contradict the sensational stories told by Palmer and Giannini. For that supposed 1947 North Pole flight, Byrd's diary reportedly states he observed no important object beyond the pole. He described seeing only a vast white desert covering the horizon. He did mention seeing mountains that reflected strange colors, but explicitly noted they were either black rock or covered in ice. No green lands, no forests, no rivers, and definitely no mammoths.
So the official record is ice and rock.
Pretty much. That enchanted continent in the sky, quote, "It's widely believed to refer to a mirage. Mirages are actually quite common in polar regions due to temperature inversions bending light rays. They can make distant ice look like land masses or create distorted images on the horizon. It's a known optical phenomenon.
So he saw a mirage, maybe? Not a hidden continent?
That's the standard explanation. In fact, some reports suggest that Byrd faced skepticism or was even viewed as mentally unstable or disabled by some officials because he reported things that sounded fantastical, even if they might have just been mirages or misinterpretations. And that alleged film footage of mammoths. There's no record of it in any official archives. Most historians believe it never existed, or the story got exaggerated over time.
Okay, so Byrd's confirmation seems shaky at best when you look at his own records. What about the satellite images? That SS7 photo with the hole?
That's easily explained too. The apparent hole in early satellite composites like SS7 wasn't a physical hole in the Earth. It was simply an artifact of how the images were made. Satellites in polar orbit don't usually fly directly over the precise geometric pole. Their orbits create coverage swaths, and when you stitch those swaths together to make a composite image of the entire polar region, there's often a small, circular area right at the pole that doesn't get direct coverage in that particular data set. It shows up as a blank spot or a hole in the final image. It's a data gap, not a geographic feature.
Ah, so it's like a missing piece in the mosaic.
Exactly. And the reason satellites don't fly directly over the pole isn't because there's a hole to avoid, it's because of orbital mechanics. Maintaining a stable orbit directly over the pole is complex and usually unnecessary for their mission, which is typically broad coverage. They're designed for specific orbits. Avoiding the exact pole is just efficient trajectory planning, not evidence of a cavity. The NORAD tracks showing avoidance of certain polar areas. Same reason orbital dynamics and mission requirements.
Makes sense. Okay, what about the natural phenomena? The warm winds, transpolar drift, aurora, lost aviators.
All have perfectly conventional scientific explanations. Warm winds in the Arctic. Those are understood meteorological phenomena, like temporary shifts in atmospheric currents bring warmer air masses north. The transpolar drift. That's a well-studied ocean and ice current driven by wind patterns and the shape of the Arctic basin. No need for an internal heat source.
And the aurora, not the inner sun leaking out.
Definitely not. The aurora borealis and australis at the South Pole is unequivocally caused by charged particles from the sun, the solar wind hitting Earth's magnetic field. Those particles get funneled towards the poles and collide with atoms in the upper atmosphere, making them glow. We can observe the solar activity and predict auroras based on it. It's textbook atmospheric physics.
Okay. And the lost Soviet flyers.
Tragic aviation accidents, sadly. Flying in the high Arctic, especially back then, was incredibly dangerous. Extreme weather, navigational challenges, mechanical failures. There are records and reasonable explanations for such losses that don't involve flying into a hidden world. Attributing them to the hollow Earth is pure speculation without evidence.
So basically, for every piece of evidence proponents cite, there's a straightforward, mundane, scientific explanation that fits within our known understanding of the planet.
Pretty much. The anecdotes might sound compelling when woven together, but individually they don't hold up against established science.
But, and this is the crucial counterargument from believers, what if the science itself is wrong or deliberately misleading? What about the allegation of information suppression, the cover-up?
Ah, yes, the final fallback position. When faced with overwhelming scientific evidence refuting their claims, proponents often resort to conspiracy theories. They argue that the scientific consensus isn't based on honest research, but is actually part of a deliberate misinformation campaign.
Orchestrated by whom?
Depends on the specific theory. Usually it's attributed to influential scientific groups, governments, especially the U.S. military-industrial complex, or sometimes international banking corporations, or shadowy global elites.
And why would they cover it up? What's the motive?
The alleged motives vary. Maybe they want to control access to vast, untapped resources inside the Earth: energy, minerals, advanced technology left by the inner inhabitants. Or perhaps they want to suppress the truth about humanity's origins or potential, keeping the population ignorant and easier to control. Brian, the Navy guy, being told by secret agents from Washington to keep quiet. That fits perfectly into this narrative. The lack of mainstream scientific proof becomes the proof of the cover-up. It's a self-sealing argument, very hard to disprove to someone who already believes it.
Right. If you believe there's a conspiracy, any evidence against your belief is just part of the conspiracy.
Exactly.
So what does this all mean? It leaves us with this fascinating clash, doesn't it? On one side, you have mountains of empirical data, physics, geology, a solid layered Earth. On the other, you have this incredibly persistent, deeply woven tapestry of myths, legends, misinterpreted observations, alleged sightings, and these deep-seated beliefs in powerful government cover-ups. It's a real battle of narratives. Hashtag tag 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 outro. Wow. What an absolutely incredible journey we've taken today. We started with the solid ground, quite literally, of scientific consensus Earth as a layered sphere mapped by seismology.
The standard model.
Right. Then we just plunged headfirst into these radical alternative ideas. We looked at historical figures like Halley, Euler, Sims, brilliant minds who, for various reasons, imagined a hollow world. It really showed how scientific thought evolves, even down unexpected paths.
Trying to explain the unknown.
Exactly. Then we explored those vivid descriptions of the inner world itself, that Arctic's paradise with its inner sun, the lush greenery, maybe even giant animals. A hidden Eden.
The stuff of legends.
Totally. From there, we traced the alleged gateways, those polar openings, complete with coordinates, and all the evidence proponents pull in, from satellite photos to warm winds to missing planes.
Connecting the dots as they see it.
Then we met the supposed inhabitants. Advanced super races, maybe the source of UFOs, tied into the mystical kingdoms of Shambhala and Agartha, bringing ancient prophecy into a physical realm.
Blurring myth and alleged reality.
And finally, we looked at the confirmers, the controversial stories around Admiral Byrd, the tales of Olaf Jansen and Brian, and that really unsettling dark thread involving Nazi Germany's supposed search for an Antarctic entrance.
A complex web of claims.
And what truly left us amazed, like we said at the start, was seeing how all these things, which seem so disconnected, ancient Tibetan myths, 17th century astronomy, Cold War satellite tech, UFO sightings, WWII conspiracies, how they all unexpectedly converged, woven together into this single, powerful, utterly fantastic concept, the enigma of the hollow earth.
It is fascinating, isn't it? What strikes me is the sheer human need, maybe, to fill the unknown with something extraordinary. Whether it's putting an inner sun inside the earth or populating it with advanced beings, it speaks volumes about our innate curiosity, our desire for meaning. Maybe a deep wish that there's more to reality than just what we see on the surface.
Yeah, more than meets the eye.
The fact that these ideas persist, even against overwhelming scientific dismissal, tells us something profound about human imagination and our enduring attraction to mystery, to the hidden.
Indeed. And that leaves us and leaves you with a final provocative thought to mull over. We live in an age, right, where almost every inch of our planet seems mapped, scanned, explored, satellites watch from above, drills probe below. So why? Why does this idea, the idea of a secret, accessible world hidden inside our own Earth, continue to hold such a powerful grip on our collective imagination, despite science saying no? What does that persistent allure, that refusal to let go of the mystery, tell us about ourselves and maybe about our endless search for wonder in a world that sometimes feels fully charted? Something to think about.
Definitely something to think about. Keep questioning, keep exploring. Thank you so much for joining us on this particularly deep dive.
Thanks, everyone.
We'll be back soon with another fascinating topic for us all to unpack together.